to you tonight Richard Rice. He's the president and forensic engineer for Mutual Engineering Incorporated. What Richard does is forensic post-catastrophe engineering analysis, and I'm pleased to present him to you tonight. Thank you.
Dunwoody tornado, Hurricane Katrina, the downtown Atlanta tornado, Superstorm Sandy, the Moore, Oklahoma tornado, Hurricane Sally, well, that's the most recent in 2020. And what to expect when you go on catastrophe cat duty. Sorry.
Okay. We're going to talk about the Dunwoody tornado. Here you have, the enhanced Fujita scale, excuse me, EF0, 65 to 85, you can read that. And the really bad one is EF5, winds over 200 miles an hour. Here's the Dunwoody tornado, April 1998. I had 5, 6 houses involved, and most of the houses looked like this when I arrived, covered in blue tarps. This is right after the tornado. The reason I know that is that you don't see a sea of blue tarps. Very soon after this, just about every roof was covered with blue tarps. Now, very interesting thing here. These houses were built in the early 20th century. The brick that they used to build those houses came from the Northeast. What they did is you had all these warehouses that were abandoned in the northeastern United States, and they would tear them down, and all that brick would get mixed in. Well, when you build and these brick warehouses, they were 3 widths, 3 layers, if you will, thick of brick. And when you kiln brick, you always put your best kiln brick on the outside, where the sun is, where the environment's going to get to it. And all of your marginally kilned brick, usually in the middle of the pile that's in the oven, that's where you put your interior brick, because it doesn't see anything. Well, all of a sudden, it all gets piled in together and gets sent south, and they build these houses with it. So after the Dunwoody tornado, all these trees were gone. And all of a sudden, all these brick now were exposed to the sun. And you'd be standing there, and a brick, right after a rain, and the brick would soak in that water because it wasn't kilned right. And out comes the sun, and huge chunks of brick would just fall off the wall. And nobody could figure that out. And I went to the Brick Institute, and they told me all about it. And that's part of what you do as a forensic engineer, is figure out things like that. Hurricane Katrina, August of 2005. It was large. A lot of wind with Katrina. Caused a lot of damage, flooded a lot of places. I bring this up because this is an example of an event where a CAT team would go out. And a CAT team is all kinds of engineers. You have civil structurals, like myself. You have mechanical and electrical. And we don't go out in a group, say in the same vehicle, but we're a team. When you're working for a company that has all these engineers, you go out and handle the claims as they come in from your insurance carriers. This storm was 460 miles wide. Think about that. It was large, very large, and a lot of wind. Here we have the downtown Atlanta tornado, March of 2008. Many of you remember that. It's rare to have a tornado go through a downtown area, and this is one of the better pictures. I worked several jobs. Well, before we do that, I wanted to show you this. Right after that Atlanta tornado, these kind of maps became available to me anyway. And here we have The worst of it was an EF2, a little over 100 miles an hour if I remember right on the scale. But that's what we had in downtown Atlanta. There's this, I believe that's a stadium right there. I worked this job. I worked several jobs, basically where the brick was, taken off, and I'd look at the structural integrity of the building. And I didn't have anything to do with this. I mean, it basically sucked the glass off the Higher Regency. They didn't need me, a civil structural engineer, but I knew others who had worked this claim. So then we have Superstorm Sandy. I don't call it a hurricane. The winds were just barely enough hurricane, if you want to call it that, but it was a superstorm, in my opinion. The most disastrous moderate wind event ever, in my opinion. Sand, sand, and more sand. This was appropriately named, and I'll show you what I mean. It was fairly large, but not as defined as Katrina, but this was huge. There's the path it took. Here we have, I think this is the Battery. Where is it? Yeah, the Battery in New York. We have water levels. You can see the water level is just 12 foot above the zero. You see the normal water level, which is green. And it flooded many, many areas. Here's one, I believe, in New Jersey. It broke it. The floods broke it, and I just wanted to show that to you. It shows the water levels. I took this picture. Now here, what's rare about this picture to me, well, here's some wood. Looks, I think wood siding, and you see some damage. But that was rare to see damage on siding. Now the whole house would get moved, as you can see here, and smash this boat into. But most of the siding pretty much was intact. For something hit here, it did happen. But the big thing was that the storm surge that came out of the Atlantic Ocean, and lots of sand. As I say here, little roof damage, little siding damage, but lots of sand and other surface things. Here I am in Lower Manhattan, Pier 17. A little closer view. The water came up to right about here. You see the arrow. There's the high water line. And you get used to finding these things because basically it leaves a line on all the glass, all the insides. That's where the water got to. And I was there to look at, I'll put it this way, I was there to confirm that there was actually water damage and things like that, because these adjusters, insurance people that you're working for, they just can't get to every single one, or they need to know, well, how much of a reserve do I need to write to get, because I'm going to be paying them some money, how much do I need to ask for, what do you think, how much damage, and that's what you do on CAT duty. Here's this house, not a lick of siding damage, but yet but where is the damage? It's down below. The sand that came in. And this house had already been renovated, or started to be renovated, and but the sand was incredible. Here we have more water line where it got up in this house. It was a great big mess. Thousands and thousands of homes were damaged. But foundation scour. Think about it. You have, I guess these, between the houses act like Venturis, because here comes all this water, and it goes in between the houses. All of a sudden, the velocity is incredible, and it just scours all the foundations. This was something on the northern side of, way out on Long Island, and where Sandy came through, only 40 miles per hour affected this area, but they filed a claim on this, but there was really no foundation. These 8x8s were just stuck in the sand. And it only took 40 miles per hour to knock it over. I went out there to confirm it, to look to basically to see what sort of concrete they had used to support this. They didn't use any. So Wind speeds at landfall. Hurricane was 140. Superstorm Sandy was 70 to 80, barely. So if Hurricane Katrina's winds were so much higher, how can it be argued that Superstorm Sandy was more devastating? Basically, integrated kinetic energy. I'll let you guys look that up, but one way I like to explain it to folks to understand this, which has more energy, a tablespoon of water at 200 degrees Fahrenheit or an ocean of water at 40 degrees Fahrenheit? The ocean full of water, at 40 degrees Fahrenheit has definitely more energy. So just like temperature is not a sole indicator of energy in a liquid, the wind speed is not the sole indicator of energy in a hurricane. So how does this relate to Hurricane Katrina and Superstorm Sandy? Difficult to read, especially on this slide, but basically we have the wind speed of Katrina, but look how much the kinetic energy of Sandy was, even though it had so much less wind. So here are the numbers of the damage caused by Sandy. Truly devastating. I've got some good stories. This is more about kinetic energy. So, I took this picture. That's how much sand. I was taken on one of the barrier islands in Jersey by an insured and his deputy nephew on that island, and I had to lay in the floorboard to get on the island because the police were everywhere, and he was breaking the law by having me out there. But when I was able to raise my head and look out, all the yards had 3 feet of sand in them. These once manicured grass lawns had 3 feet of sand as far as the eye could see. Where the amount of sand, it was just incredible. There were front end loaders from Mississippi. They could not get enough equipment on the island to get all that sand moved quickly enough. It was just amazing. And here it just got in the house. It was just everywhere. The sand. It really was something. So here's the Fujita scale again, the enhanced Fujita scale. Remember the Atlanta one was only, say, EF2 if I remember right, got to 111, 135. Something to remember, most things are designed, was ASCE 7. Around here it's what, 90 miles per hour winds, I believe is what it says. And most things survive 90 per hour, 90, EF1, tornado, the winds from that. It's the trees that are the problem. When the trees fall over on a 90 mile per hour wind, that's what really does the damage, and usually that's the case. So this is the Moore tornado, Oklahoma. I was out there a week. Right there in the middle, EF5, over 200 miles per hour. It was truly something to see. Now here's the elementary school where those 7 elementary school age children were killed. They did exactly what they were supposed to do, hide, but with an EF5 there was no running from that. I was standing on houses that I was there for, looking down. They were kind of in a valley, and you could look down, and it was a very somber place. Just getting to the houses that I wanted to get to was a chore, was an adventure. I'll put it that way, because the police were everywhere, and you have to be prepared for that. You better have your creds, you better have your cars, you better have, here's the paper that says I got a claim number, I need to go look at this house, it's right here. And usually you'll get challenged a lot, but you just you have your information there and you can go do your job. Here's one of the houses, basically the doors and the roof, if it was an issue, and the windows. Again, a lot of blue tarps. Now, let me back up a little bit. This house, when I get called out, I don't get called out where it's an E5. I usually get called when the houses are right in here, like an E1, EF1, EF2. That's where I get called in. That's where I'm standing. Had a house, a couple of the houses I looked at were right here, and you could look down to see the school. Here's one. lack of brick ties on that one. I don't know how that went, if they paid, because it was lack of construction. There were no brick ties. Crazy. The things the kind of things you see when you do this work. And let's see. And you see the hurricane straps. They started to fail. They're failed. Not started to. When they're like this, they're failed. And so you probably got a new roof. But I just report it. Any questions before I go on? Okay. Any questions online you can ask? Okay. This is Hurricane Sally. You see the outline of Alabama, Mississippi. I had seven houses to do. It was quite a hurricane, as you can imagine. Category 1. Still, I saw a lot of this. These huge boats laid up against a house. Oh yeah, there's the bay. Yeah, Mobile Bay is out in here, and it just brought this boat right up against the house. Made the outside deck cattywampus. So all the nailed connections, they had to be pulled out and everything redone. Took out that column right there. You see a temporary that somebody else put in. Here was one of the most beautiful spots of beach I've ever been to. But this one, there were quite a lot of wind, so it took off a lot of siding. I don't know if you can tell it. There'll be a better picture coming up. It basically sucked this section right off the wall. And that was really the only damage I saw, but it was significant enough. I mean, you see the gap right there. Just basically just sucked it right again from the house. And so all that wall had to be redone. And we'll get into the dealing with the people here in a minute. Here's one. Couple of lawyers bought this house in Fairplay, Alabama, if you know where that is, by Mobile Bay. And in this particular, what made this interesting, somebody else took these pictures. Usually when you get there, the trees are all gone, and it's great that you have an insured, a property owner that took a bunch of pictures and that can help you out. And this is not just in hurricane jobs, but sometimes you get asked, is this crack fresh or new? Well, I see a lot of paint in this crack. This crack had been there a while and was probably there before the incident. So that's a little something you do when you're looking. When somebody says, well, my entire foundation there's a crack in it, so it has to be replaced. I says, well, can you explain these 3 layers of paint inside this crack? So here's one right on Mobile Bay. They had just had Jubilee. I don't know if you know what that is there, but here's where a tree hit a house. And you just don't see this type of construction every day. Oh, it's beautiful. These homes were something else. Very nice people. Everybody was pretty nice here. Oh, something else. Here they had the hardwood floors. They get wet. What do? They buckle. I know it's difficult to see, but that's why you're seeing that white line right there. This is probably the saddest house, the saddest case that I worked. 3, maybe 4 generations of people living in this house. This is a small, maybe 1,400 square foot house, and there were 7 or 8 people, 3 or 4 generations of folk. Great-grandma, grandma, great-grandpa, and grandpa, and all the little ones and little bitty babies. I mean, it was a house full. I'm looking at this beam, and I'm looking at that. Usually that's a fresh crack, and so I started looking around a little more. It moved the whole house off its foundation. I got to looking at and there's no getting around it. That house has to come down and be rebuilt. A house that was built, I want to say in the early '60s. And this is not just the only evidence, but I'm just telling you, it was a terrible judgment call I had to make. But where were these people going to live? And because there was really no place to live at that time, and especially with the small babies, and they had a mentally challenged uncle. Where were they going to put him during all this? I mean, it was you deal with that when you do this kind of work. So, what to expect when you go on CAT duty, catastrophe duty? Well, definitely difficulty finding products and services. My first tour during Superstorm Sandy, I could only get gas because of the last number on my rental car on the plate. I could Monday, Wednesday, Friday, whatever. So I had to be careful where I went and all the jobs I had to do, because I had to get back, and the next day I may not have been able to go out. So you have to parse out those things. These homes have no electricity. Oh, and in Superstorm Sandy, I was lucky to get a hotel room, because usually these people are having, they're kicked out of their homes by the insurance company. Well, asked to leave by their insurance company, and they're given a stipend at a hotel. So these hotels are filled with these people who can't live in their house anymore. And here I am in the middle of the week trying to write reports, and at this Hilton Garden Inn in New Jersey, and here are these 10-year-olds that have been cooped up for weeks, and they're running up and down the hall. You don't dare say anything. You have to show a little grace, because Mama, she's feeling it bad, because their kids, they're bouncing off the walls, and she's letting them get out a little energy. And so I just put earplugs in and go on. Clean water and food, that can be difficult to find, especially after a hurricane. My first tour of Sandy, I did two-week tours, and in my first tour it was difficult, especially when I had to go into Lower Manhattan, because everything was turned off. Here you are, beautiful Lower Manhattan, right on the Roosevelt, nothing, absolutely nothing. You could drive around. Stoplights were, iffy at best. So, and internet, no. If you're lucky, usually you had to, you always had, believe it or not, you had cell service, so you used your phone as a hotspot. But internet in the hotels or anywhere else, no. I told you about the guy that took me in with his deputy nephew, and lawlessness. You have to deal with a lot of that. There are looters out there. I went into this one house on the Jersey Shore. The nephew, the deputy nephew, had walked away, and he walked back to the car. Well, I walked up to another house that I was going to look at, and people just sort of eased on out of there and walked away. Well, of course I let them do that, but they were probably there looting. But at night, oh, it was the Wild West out there. They had shot. You probably didn't hear it in the news, but they had shot several looters that after the curfew. After dark, curfew, nobody can be out there. The difficulty traveling to and through the area. The only rental car I could find during my first tour of Sandy was a full-size Chevrolet Suburban, the biggest car they had on the lot. That's the only thing they could rent me. And I said, now I'm going into Lower Manhattan. She said, sorry, this is all we got. I say, fine. And I'm driving that thing through Chinatown, just all over, the island. And I love Chinese food, but after a hurricane, driving through Chinatown, that is a very special stink. Oh my gosh, that's something after a flood. But did a lot of work there. Let's see. Sometimes in doing this kind of work, and even when you're just doing work, somebody had a house fire. You deal with depressed and angry property owners. They're not sleeping in their own house. They're not sleeping in their own bed. Their babies are having to be, in a hotel, and you just have to, put your patience hat on, big time, because you're dealing with people that are dealing with a lot, and because they know that you're going to go home, You know, I've actually, well, you're going to go home. What do you care? You know, I said, well, I just want to get done with what I need to do. And I want to, and you tell them the protocol of how you're going to write a report, and you're going to send that report to the insurance adjuster, and everything that you found will be in that. Because a lot of times they'll want to pin you down right then and there. Well, what are you going to say? What are you going to say? Well, you really don't want to do that for many reasons. Legal reasons. You don't want it coming back to bite you. Because if they misconstrue what you said, but you just want your report to speak for itself. And you want to let them know that you're going to be writing them a report and getting it on to the insurance adjuster. And like I said, put on your patient's hat. And when a devastating hurricane goes through, very little power, cash is king. Because credit cards are not working that well. When I went to Moore, Oklahoma, I get off the plane, I go to the rental car, and I already rented a truck. I was able to do a full-size pickup truck. I go to the local Home Depot, and they had no power, but they were still selling things cash. Oh, it was just all, you know, cash and carry, cash and carry. I bought a $200 20-foot ladder, and the straps to keep it, you know, tied to the truck. So, you know, yes, I flew there, and so here I have this ladder. So I, you know, did my job, paid cash for a lot of things. Gas, you probably ought to have $400 or $500 in your pocket, and when you're doing these things. And when it was all over, I had to take the truck back to the rental car, but before I did that, here comes an adjuster with a pickup truck. I said, "Can I give you my ladder?" He said, "Yeah, I'll take it." So I got it. I'm flying home. I can't take it with me. So, you know, paying it forward, if you will. So I gave him the ladder. Being away for long periods of time, there was a benefit to me being in Jersey, is that's where my wife is from, and her Uncle Joey lives there. So during my second tour, you know, I'm not complaining. I had a Longhorns and a Ruby Tuesdays to pick from every single night.
Alert from calendar. Go to webinar. Fiverr.com questions answered.
I'm eating better than most, right? Well, Uncle Joey, he calls me up and he says, "Well, I'm bringing a bottle of wine and I'm taking you to my Italian restaurant." Okay, yeah, I'll go. Yeah, he took care of me, and it was fun. It was very relaxing. But I'm sure you have some questions about these things. Is anybody online? Any questions?
Nobody online.
Wake up, everybody. Games hasn't started yet, so.
Anybody here?
Okay. One thing I want to talk about before I leave is that I'm a member of the National Academy of Forensic Engineers. In fact, that's where I was this past weekend, and they were in Tucson, Arizona. I was secretary and went to the board meeting, and on Saturday and Sunday they give presentations, 8 a day, and you learn things about a forensic examination, break examination. In my case, I gave papers, not this past weekend, but I have given papers where drywall, it was a construction accident where drywall fell over and killed a lady. And I also worked at the Atlanta Botanical Garden case, if you remember, where they just started pouring and it collapsed and it killed one man and hurt 18. I worked for many of those people, many of those plaintiffs. And I gave a paper on that, and just the forensic process, what you learn those kind of things. And I'll let you read that. Forensic engineering is the application of the art, and let you read the rest. But like I say, these are the things we're committed to: serving the public, serving the jurisprudential system, and serving the Academy members. That's what we do. So, one thing you need to know is that once you become a NAIF member, the engineer, you are a board-certified forensic engineer, board-certified diplomate forensic engineer. People ask, well, what does that mean, you're board-certified? Well, just like any profession, you have the way they become board-certified, anesthesiologist, any type of doctor, how they become board-certified. That's a big deal. You hear them on the commercials saying they are all the time. Well, basically, it's a group of your peers that you have to prove that you've touched all the bases for forensic engineering, that you have performed a certain number of investigations, you've been doing this a certain number of years, you have been deposed a certain number of times, and you have been cross-examined at trial a certain number of times. And with that, you become a board-certified forensic engineer. I've achieved the level of fellow because of my years of experience and what have you. And I encourage anyone interested in this type of work, and it's not for everyone, I got to tell you, especially when you do CAT duty. It can be tedious, but I encourage you to join the National Academy of Forensic Engineers. Question?
We have one online.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so from Roger, he says, do you care to comment on the Waffle House Index? Are you familiar with what that is?
Is this Roger Boyell?
No, Roger Grabman.
Grabman, okay, Roger, the Waffle House Index. Some Waffle Houses are better than others, and some of their, and I'm gonna be very clean about this. Some of their waitresses are prettier than others, and that's all I gotta say.
Good response. I have a question.
I'm gonna turn that on.
It should be on.
Yep.
I have a question. You mentioned that you did not want to go and give the owner of the structure a answer right then and there. Can you give an example or two where you investigated something and it appeared the root cause was one thing, but then when you studied it a little more or investigated a little further, you turned out the root cause was actually something else?
You know, you try to prepare for your presentations thinking of everything, and you win. You stumped me. I'm sure it's happened because when, well, the brick thing I talked about, that's one where I had no idea. I didn't know which way I was going to go on that one. But I delved into it. It was one of those situations where I delved into the brick. I called the brick, it's the BIA, Brick Institute of America, yeah. I called them and said, hey, you guys know this stuff. Tell me what should my thinking be? You know, if you ever get in a situation like that, yeah, you got to go to the folks that know. That's the best way I can answer.
All right, so Millard from online asks, what did you learn in Kentucky?
I did not go to Kentucky, but what I have seen so far, it teaches me that these EF5 hurricanes are not to be taken lightly. When you are in your home and you get a tornado warning, hit the bricks. Get low. Get as low. Get in the bathtub. Do what you have to do. Tornadoes, those winds at over 200 miles an hour, just they're unimaginable, completely unimaginable. We have a question in the gallery. Or you have another online question? No. Go ahead.
Two-part question. First is, are you typically retained by the insurance companies or by the property owners? And then second, building on the question that Lee asked, when you discover root cause kinds of things, is there a mechanism to collect that information and feed it back into future building standards?
What was your first question? I'm ready for the second one. Yeah, let's just do one at a time.
First question was, do you typically get retained by insurance companies or by property owners?
In CAT claims, it's the insurance companies. Rarely will I get involved, get hired by the homeowner. I have been many times, but usually they find, you know, it's just too expensive. And so they rely on the insurance company, you know, to pay for the engineer. Now I do a lot of, now this is in CAT claims. Yeah. Doing civil litigation, that's a whole other animal. We can talk about that later. But doing CAT claims, I normally get hired by the insurance company. Now as far as taking what I have learned during a claim and applied it to standards, well, there was the closest thing. There wasn't a CAT claim. The closest thing was at the stadium during the warm-up, a baseball game warm-up. Fella was out there in left field in the stands and fell over. He dropped 30 feet. You know, and the thing is, the railing's only this high. You know, maybe it was only maybe 20-something inches, and that was to code. So after that claim settled, I went to the Department of Community Services, from which all Georgia codes, you know, are adopted, and gave a presentation. I won't say that they jumped all over it right after it, but I hope I was influential in some way in getting not only them raised, but also putting out the netting. You know, you go to these oil derricks, and you see all this netting around the perimeter. You know, people are going to trip, people are going to get sick and fall off these things, and to have that netting out there doesn't get in the way of the line of sight to watch the game. And that was my thing that I went to the Department of Community Affairs with. I said, the technology's out there, it needs to be done. Anyway, that's where learning something, I took it an extra step.
Okay, Roger asks, he's basically filling in what he was asking before about Waffle House. He says, I had read that the severity of a storm can be assessed by how long the Waffle Houses are not open.
He ain't lying. Yeah, if the Waffle Houses are open, if they're down for a long time, you got a really bad storm, because they're one of the first things you hope to bring back up. And I actually talked to a manager about that one time, now that you mention it. That's what they do. They go in after an event and get it right, to be able to feed the first responders, and the folks coming in later. So.
Yeah, I seem to remember hearing on the news at some point over the last several years, they have like some sort of emergency operations center equivalent that they use.
That's true. Very true, now that you mention it. Any more questions? Okay. Well, the game is going to start soon. So I thank everyone here. Thank you very much, and thank you online for attending. I appreciate your time. Again, thank you.
Richard, thank you very much for coming. Thanks for the talk. I know the topic of forensic engineering is very intellectually very stimulating to me and everybody else. And thank you very much. We'd like to give you the coveted professional engineering mug. And thank you once again for your presentation. It's very enlightening.
Thank you. Something for my daughter to steal. Oh, she will. Yep. Yeah. Again, thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation given at one of the Atlanta Metro Chapter meetings of the Georgia Society of Professional Engineers, an affiliate of the National Society of Professional Engineers. To find out more about us or to join us, check us out at gspe.org.